They called it the war to end all wars. So how on earth did the end of World War I lead just 2 decades later to an even bigger, even more brutal global conflict? Well, that's what we're digging into. We're going to trace the exact path from what was supposed to be a lasting peace straight to the edge of utter chaos.
The philosopher Antonio Gramsci wrote this right in the middle of that period, and wow, does it hit the nail on the head. Imagine it. The old familiar world had just been completely shattered, and something totally new and uncertain was trying to claw its way into existence. So you have to ask yourself, in a gap like that, what kind of monsters are going to crawl out?
Right, so our story really kicks off on a continent basically haunted by ghosts. Europe was desperately trying to pick up the pieces after years of horrific war. But this wasn't just about rebuilding a few cities. No, this was a time of deep, deep change that was about to redefine the entire world.
And just look at the difference here. I mean, it's night and day. Before the war, you had these massive, powerful empires, booming industries, and this general feeling of, well, confidence. But after, the whole world was turned upside down. We're talking entire cities blasted into rubble, economies in ruins, and a whole generation of people facing poverty and unemployment. Everything they thought was certain was just gone. The very foundation of the continent had cracked wide open. And this map, this shows you the political earthquake I'm talking about. Take a look at 1914. You see these huge empires, right? The German, the Austro-Hungarian, the Ottoman. Now flash forward to 1923. Poof, they're gone. And in their place, you have this messy patchwork of new countries with new borders. And let me tell you, this was not a clean process. It created a ton of instability and lit all these new little fires of tension all across Europe.
So, all that instability, it leads us right here to the first major turning point, the very first domino to fall. This was a peace treaty that was supposed to lock in peace forever, but instead it might have actually guaranteed the next war.
And that domino was the Treaty of Versailles. See, the thing you have to get about this treaty is that it wasn't really about healing. It was about punishment. It basically forced Germany to take all of the blame for the war, pay absolutely crushing amounts of money, and give up a ton of valuable land. So instead of closing the book on the war, it just created this deep, festering wound of national humiliation. A wound that, as it turns out, would never really heal.
But that anger in Germany wasn't the only fire smoldering. An economic hurricane was brewing, and this one was about to sweep across the entire globe. And this wasn't just some recession. It was a total, absolute collapse that would pretty much spare no one.
Yeah, the Great Depression was basically a perfect storm. It all kicked off with that huge stock market crash in 1929, but there was so much more feeding into it. You had factories making way more stuff than people could actually afford to buy, partly because wages were just too low. Then banks started failing, just wiping out people's life savings overnight. And when international trade just dried up, the crisis went global.
And this photo, this makes it real. This isn't just about charts and numbers. It's about real people suffering. Millions lost everything, their jobs, their savings, their homes. These little shanty towns, they called them Hoovervilles in America, they popped up everywhere. And that level of raw desperation, that fear and anger, that was about to change everything.
Which brings us right back to Gramsci's monsters. Because when people are that desperate and their own governments seem totally unable to help them, they start looking for radical solutions. They start looking for strong leaders who promise to just come in and fix everything.
And here is the absolute key. To millions of suffering people, democracy started to look like a failed experiment. These governments, a lot of them pretty new, just couldn't get a handle on the crisis. Democracy felt weak, it felt useless, and it felt completely out of touch. People felt abandoned.
So into that vacuum of power and hope stepped a whole new kind of leader. In places like Germany and Italy, these totalitarian strongmen started to rise up. They promised jobs, they promised stability, and maybe most important of all, they promised to bring back national pride. And for millions of people at rock bottom, that was a message that was almost impossible to resist.
So what was this new ideology they were selling? Well, a lot of the time, it was fascism. And at its core, fascism just throws democracy and personal freedom right out the window. It's all built on this idea of extreme nationalism and a single, all-powerful leader. The individual means nothing. What matters is the glory of the state and total, unquestioning obedience to its leader.
And how do they make this happen? Through something called totalitarianism. And it's pretty much what it sounds like. Total control. Think of the government taking over every single part of your life. Your job, the news you're allowed to see, the ideas you're taught in school. There's zero room for freedom, zero room for disagreement, only absolute loyalty.
Okay, so let's put all these pieces together now. You can start to see this really clear, tragic path forming, right? It's like a chain of events where each domino just perfectly knocks over the next one, leading to one single, inevitable outcome.
Let's just walk through it. It's a chain reaction. Step 1. A really harsh peace treaty creates a ton of anger and resentment. Step 2. A massive economic collapse causes worldwide desperation. Step 3. People completely lose faith that democracy can save them. Step 4. This opens the door for totalitarian leaders to grab total power. And finally, Step 5. Those leaders start using aggressive, expansionist policies that push the world, once again, right into war.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty heavy question for our own time. We've just seen how political anger and economic misery created the perfect conditions for the monsters of the 20th century to rise up. So it really makes you think, if that's the road they traveled on, what do we need to do to protect that road today?